Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting fantasy artwork and I'm sipping on some blueberry tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you could certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, burnt sienna, which I may call rust, green oxide, burnt umber, which I'll always call brown, Mars black, cobalt blue, fluorescent pink, and chrome yellow. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk that I'm going to be using for some drawing. And then I have 3 brushes from my personal brush line, which is Michelle the Painter brushes. I have a 3/4 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 6 bright synthetic brush. So this is a kind of a flat type of brush. And then I have a number 3 round synthetic brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch those up as well if you'd like to. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I will be providing you with a few additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you could purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the same size and type of the canvas to the same type of paints and brushes and all the good stuff in between. So that's there. There's also a link where you could download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to be painting the background. I'm going to use my large bristle brush to paint, but I'm going to just use my small brush to demonstrate how I'm going to be creating a couple of custom colors. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a solid color for the background of our landscape within the picture frame, and then we'll be using another solid color, a nice tan color, which will be the base coat for our wall and the frame. So I'm going to show you how to section it off in a minute, but first I'm going to make my 2 custom colors. I've got my small brush. I'm going to be using pink, light pink, for the center of my landscape. So I have created that color here. How I got to that was pink and white. So I didn't do any fancy color mixing here, just pink and white is going to give me this nice soft pastel type of shade of pink. And that's what I'm going to be using as the base color for my entire landscape. And then the tan that is sitting next to it, so I'm just washing and drying my little brush right here, that's going to be the wall color and the base coat for the frame itself. So how I got to this was mostly brown and white. So mostly brown, a little bit of white, and you can also add, depending on what your preference is for this color, you could add a tiny touch of yellow and a tiny touch of black if you wanted to. So this will just turn it more, maybe have a little greenish hue to it, or just, you know, whatever color tan is visually appealing to you. So this is what I'm going for in this color palette. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large brush. I'm going to be coloring in the base coat for the landscape first, but I want to kind of give myself a couple of dots or markers so I have kind of a little bit of a barrier. So I'm going to put my pink paint, my light pink paint, on my brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find myself, let me just make sure my canvas is center here, the center of my canvas. I'm going to come down about 3 inches and make myself a little bit of a marker. Then I can use that marker with my brush and kind of see how far down I did that, and then just come over to the right, maybe a few inches away from the edge of the canvas, make yourself a marker there. Do the same thing a little bit to the left-hand side, give yourself a marker in through there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on all the other 3 sides of my canvas. So I want to go about 3 inches away from the edge of my canvas. So somewhere in here, I'll go somewhere in here. Maybe I'll do 2 on the right and the left. And then let me just make sure I've got my measuring tool properly. And then maybe 3 down at the bottom. So this is just an easy way to give yourself a pretty symmetrical, I'm creating a rectangle right now. You could do it obviously with a ruler if you wanted to, but this is going to give me something that is just simple for me to color in. I don't need to go anything more fancy than that. Then I'm going to just connect my dots. So I don't need a perfect rectangle in through here. I just want something that I can have as a barrier or an exterior edge to my interior landscape. But again, I don't need it to be perfect because you're going to see we are going to be painting the frame of this, the picture frame will be painted right over this seam. So as you're going through this process, don't feel that it has to be perfect around these edges. You're just really giving yourself somewhere to start, and then you're just going to paint that entire interior with that light pink color. Just going back and forth, no special brush stroke in through here. This color will cover pretty well. Plus, we're doing a whole bunch of details on top of this later, so don't even feel the need to get this a perfect solid coat. And then once I've got this done, just kind of making sure I bring this all the way to the edges, all the way down here. And again, doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle, but I'm about 3 inches away from the edge of my canvas. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to paint that exterior with that tan color that I created. So just washing and drying my brush. And as I do this exterior, I'm aware that my pink may still be a little wet, and if I bump into it again, I'm okay with that because I know that I'm going to be doing more detail stuff around it. So I just picked up my custom tan color, and I'm going to paint this entire exterior. And again, not terribly concerned if it's a perfect coat. I know that, again, mine's going to cover pretty well because the opacity of a tan color like this is pretty good, which means you're not going to be able to see through it too much. But if you're working with a thinner bodied paint, or you're working with a firmer brush that might be leaving a little bit more scratchy type of marks where you can see through the paint and see the evidence of the canvas underneath, you could, on this exterior wall, you could certainly do a second coat on that. But we are, like I said, going to have the frame that's going to cross over both of them. So again, not terribly important if it is a perfect coat. I'm going to go right up to my pink and even bump into it. Again, not concerned about a perfect meeting point. Just want to kind of close the gap between the two of them. And if they merge into one another, that's okay too. And you can always, as you go through this process, kind of check you know, your height, if one's way higher than the other. But again, we'll have plenty of time to modify those edges when we do the frame on it. And then once I've got this done, let's see, I'm going to just finish this up and through here. I am going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once I've got this done, just get this little edge up in through here. I'm going to wash and dry this brush, and a touch of my fluorescent pink. So just a little tiny touch of my fluorescent pink, add some deep pink colors into there. I didn't wash my brush, so it may end up a little purpley looking because I still have remnants of the blue on my brush as well. You can add these bright little vibrant pink notes wherever you want to. Once I've got a little bit of that on there, I'm going to pick up my light pink on my brush. So this will help me to, one, kind of work some of that. If there's a lot of blue left on my brush, it'll help work that off. And it'll also help me to make sure that I have done a second coat on the whole sky. So if I had any unpainted areas from the first layer that I did, this will help me to just make sure that I've got that painted in. And now that I'm coming almost about a third of the way down my sky, I'm going to start picking up a little bit of my light pink and yellow. So mostly light pink with a touch of yellow as well. And this is going to start giving me, making my way towards that sunlit area. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of my fluorescent pink and yellow. I kind of want a little bit of a peachy tone. So I have yellow and fluorescent pink on my brush now. Ooh, that's going to be too bright. Hold on. I don't want it too bright. There we go. That made it more subtle for me. So you can, of course, explore these colors as much as you want. If you want more pink or more yellow, feel free to adapt it to whatever is visually appealing to you. Maybe a little bit more of my fluorescent pink, just to, yeah, there we go. Just when you're doing these fantasy style paintings, it's really about just bringing it to a place that is making you happy, because these are just meant to be happy, imaginative type of paintings. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of my light pink just to get myself to transition down to this lightest area that I'm going to be putting on in a second here. Now I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white on my dirty brush. So this is going to start my real light area right down in through here, which is where I'm going to have my sun emerging later, but just kind of getting this on in through here. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit more yellow. And again, when I say tiny bit, I'm really talking just this tiny dot of paint on the edge of my brush or on the corner of my brush, especially when it comes to yellow, because yellow can really easily kind of steal the show, take over the visual aspect of it. So if you want to, you know, not have it overpower just a teeny tiny bit, I'm actually picking up a little bit more of my light pink to dull down that yellow a little bit. And then of course you can modify that as much as you want. But what I'm going to do now is I'm moving down to my little river. So I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white paint on my dirty brush, and right below this light area is where I'm going to kind of start my river like this. I'm going to be transitioning from white to yellow to pink to blue in like a reflective type of quality or reflective type of way for this river. But I want to give us a couple of markers so we know where we're headed. So this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to come directly down from here till I meet my what's going to be my wall or frame, and go to the left about an inch and a half, make myself a marker, and then I'm going way far over here until I'm about 2 inches away from here and give myself another marker. So that's going to be this long triangular type of section. It's going to be narrow here and get wider here. So I already did a little bit of white. Now I'm going to pick up a touch of yellow, and I'm going to give myself a couple of yellow squiggly marks like this. Now I'm going to pick up a touch of pink, and I'm leaving some of that pink underneath, the light pink. I just picked up fluorescent pink. Give myself a couple of little squiggly lines in through here. I'm just looking for some nice reflections in my water, and now I'm going to pick up some of my cobalt blue. And if you get to a point where you're like, wow, that was just too much, too dark, too light, just give it a minute, let it dry, and then you can put some of that light pink back on top of it. So if you put too much, just pick up a touch of your light pink and you can just go right over it. We're just looking for a section in our painting or in this landscape that's going to reflect the colors up above. So it doesn't need to be anything super perfect. And then once you've got that done, we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. I just am picking up a little bit more blue. I feel like I want a little bit more blue in here, so I just picked up just a touch more blue. And then I'm going to wash and dry this brush, and I'm going to get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be painting the land. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are black, green, yellow, and white. And I'm going to refer to the land as the land that's on the ground, on on the ground. And then I'm going to be making these fantasy-esque land arches that are going to have a castle on it and some bubbles and some waterfalls. So we're going to do all those land pieces now. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. I'm going to start at the bottom so we can put our ground land into place, and then we'll do our arches. So my ground, I'm going to have really dark at the bottom. So I'll start it with some green and black. And then as I move my way towards the top, which will be a little bit higher, like I've got my river here, I'm going to have my land kind of coming up a little bit from that. So it looks like the river is kind of set in the landscape. So I'll have it, my land grass kind of going lighter as it goes towards this light source. And then we'll do our arches in a minute. So I'm going to put a teeny tiny bit of black paint and green on the tip of my brush. So again, just a teeny tiny bit. I'm going to start down here on the bottom right hand side. And again, I'm going right up to where my frame is going to be, and it's okay if you bump into it again because you're going to be doing lots of stuff on top of it. And then I'm just kind of dotting, so I'm allowing this to have like a stippling type of textural effect. With my remnants on my brush, I'm going to come over to this little corner in through here and do the same thing, just kind of coloring it in and then just kind of tapping it so it's got a little bit of a textural type of effect. I'm now picking up green. So as I'm doing this, I'm okay with being able to still see some of that pink underneath it. I kind of want to, because that just adds to my visual thought of this being a fantasy style type of painting, because I don't often see pink grass, but I can imagine there to be some in a fantasy type of a world. And I'm going to bring this right along my river's edge in through here. So I have some kind of place that it kind of overlaps into that river. So the river looks like it's set in. So that's looking pretty good. And now I'm just going to keep picking up green to get a little bit higher over in through here. Again, I'm just kind of dotting it. I want it to go lighter and lighter as it goes towards that light source area. So now I've got about this far. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of green and yellow. And again, just a itty bitty bit on the tip of my brush because I have such a small area I'm working on right now. I don't need to overpaint. I don't need to overload my brush. I'm going to come up maybe about this high over here on the left hand side. I know that my girl is going to be in through here, so I don't need to, again, I don't need to overpaint it. Just kind of giving myself some fun lighter colors as it's going up towards that light source. So just kind of tapping away here. In a second, like right now, I'm going to pick up a touch of yellow and white again on my dirty brush, so I still have the remnants of green on there as well. It's kind of bringing this up right along the edge of my river and through there, or my brook, whatever you want to call it, something like that. Same thing over on this side, like that. And now I'm going to pick up a little bit more white, just so I can have some little twinkly kind of pieces of grass right along coming from that light source, something like this. And if you felt that you wanted your water to stand out a little bit more than your land, you could always put a little bit extra, say, green along the edges so you can really see the difference between the two. So that'll be a visual preference on your part. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to do my arches. So I'm going to have 4, and I'm going to have them really looking like they're going off into the distance. So I'm going to have a small one kind of haloing this bright area in through here, and then I'll have another one kind of coming up like this, where I'm going to have a castle on top of this second one, and I'm going to have a third one that's going to kind of wrap around in through here, and then I'll have the essence of one that like kind of goes out of the viewing range of this interior picture. So I'm going to start with just green on my brush, and I am doing a very small section. So what I'm going to do in order to control my brush is I'm going to take it and I'm going to take the tip of it and just kind of squish it in my paint like this. You could certainly use a smaller brush, but I'm using this brush because I like how it gets the texture going. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of tap this little top of a arch like this. Something like that. And again, I like the brush because it's going to give me these little frilly edges to it. And then you can even tap it like right into that land, so it looks like it's kind of making its way into that land. We'll add a little bit more texture to it in a minute with some black, but I'm going to start these just with some green first. My next one I'm going to do is going to be somewhere in through here, and I'm going to bring it, I would say, probably up almost a third of the way between here and here, so maybe somewhere in through here, just giving you a couple little markers, and then to the left of here maybe about 2 inches, and then I'll just kind of connect these with this real fun just kind of arch. I'm getting the spaces to be wider apart on this left hand side for some good visual dimension in through here, and then as they get closer to us or bigger or closer to the viewer, I'm going to make them a little bit wider or thicker, so it looks like they're closer to the viewer. You can even put these little like pieces maybe hanging down, like it's maybe some little vines hanging down. We're going to have a couple of waterfalls. We're going to have, bubbles. We're going to have all kinds of other fun stuff. But if you wanted to give it this extra bit of greenery along the way, that's up to you, bringing it out a little bit further as it's meeting that land, as if it's growing off of that land. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a really big one. I'm going to go about, I would say about halfway between here and the top of my canvas is going to be my first area for that one. And then maybe about halfway between here. I said top of the canvas. I meant top of the interior picture canvas. I'm going to get the picture within the picture confused here. I'm going to go about halfway between here and the top of that frame thing, so somewhere in through here, and then over on this left hand side I'll go almost halfway between here and here, somewhere in through here, and then connect those with my dotting, stippling type of brush stroke, so it looks like a nice big arch in through here. And then again, I want it to have a little bit more volume than this one in through here, so I'm just going to make sure that the width of my section is a little bit wider. And again, I'm going to add a little bit of black and a little bit more dimension to it in a minute, but before we end this step. But right now, just getting this green on here, so it will start my process. Maybe just a couple of little fun pieces sticking out here and there. And again, you could use different brushes. You could be using a fan brush to do this, or a smaller bristle brush, whatever works for you, or even a round brush or a bright brush. So now the next one is just going to be kind of the essence of it outside of the picture. So I'm going to just put a dot there, maybe here, and just imagine it going all the way up in through here and maybe coming out somewhere here. And I'm going to go maybe about halfway between here and here is where it's going to end. And then I'm just going to kind of dot this little area and then the little area over on the right hand side. And again, just making it a little bit, trying to make it a little bit wider than this one, but I don't want to take away all of my details that I had. So maybe I bring this down in through here, like the details of the sky. So just making sure I've got this maybe coming down, giving the illusion that this one is, got lots more to it than the ones that are lower. That looks pretty good to me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up green plus a teeny tiny bit of black paint. My light source is here, so all of my shadow stuff should be on the top side of all of these pieces. So I just picked up a tiny bit of black paint, and I'm just going to dot in little bits of black kind of speckles on that top side of each, or the outside, top outside of each one of these areas. So just little bits of this is going to give you some great dimension within these arches. I don't need to do much, just a teeny tiny bit is going to give me a good amount of dimension. So as you're going through this, just know you don't have to go wild with it. Just kind of giving a few little darker marks in through here is going to do a lot of, give a lot of information, a lot of visual information. And then once we're done with this, we're going to be switching to our small brush. So you can put this large brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint a castle. I'm using my small detail brush. You could certainly use any small detail brush that you'd like to. I'm going to be painting just a silhouette of my castle, so I'm just going to be using black paint. As I do this, just know it's a kind of freestyle castle building that I'm doing on the top of a fun fantasy archway, so you can certainly build yours any way that you want to. I'm going to be using kind of watered down black paint, thinned out black paint, so I can get some nice tiny lines. As you go through yours, you might find that you want to use a smaller brush or make your paint a little bit more liquid. What I'm going to be doing is I take my black paint and I'm going to be adding a touch of water into it, so it gives it some nice fluidity. So when I want to go and do a smaller line, I'll have a better shot at getting those small lines as opposed to thicker paint that will make it a little bit more difficult. And I also won't be pushing hard. So if I push hard, I'm going to get a wide line. If I push soft, I'll get a thinner line. So that'll give you kind of a good starting point to jump off. And just know, as again, this is a fantasy castle, so it can be any way that you want it to look. How I like to kind of build mine is just kind of decide how wide I want it to go. I'm going to have it on this arch in through here, so I'm going to have it going maybe as far over as here, somewhere in through here, and then maybe on the left hand side I'll have it somewhere in through here. So that gives me my width, and then all I need to do is make a whole bunch of shapes. So I'm going to make a lot of rectangles, I'm going to make a lot of arcing lines. So I'm going to start with my main kind of place of my main kind of structure of the building, which is just going to be this kind of rectangle type of a shape. Something like that. I'm just putting my head back so I can make sure that I've got it kind of straight on either side. I want to use some of these colors in the background to enhance the appearance of my castle. So I'm going to just kind of give myself maybe an arc for a doorway, maybe a line down the center, a couple of dots for handles. I can do lots of windows and stuff. So if I want in this particular section, I can just kind of give myself a couple of lines like this, and now all of a sudden I've got some windows up there, or maybe a circle with an X in the middle gives me some more window type of thing. You can color in the around that window, so you can use the backdrop as colors for the doors, the see-through part of windows. Just imagine this to be whatever way you want it. It's really fun making these type of paintings because you just get to let your imagination run wild. So if I want a bunch of detail, all I need to do is kind of make X's or circles or other kind of fun geometric type of shapes. If I want there to be maybe a little balcony off of here, I can draw a line, a vertical line or horizontal line, and then just make a whole bunch of little vertical lines. Now I have a balcony. If I want there to be a room underneath the balcony, I just make a little square, and now I've got a room underneath the balcony. If I want there to be maybe another level, I can just put another rectangle. Maybe we've got some windows there, maybe we've got a little window in through here. So you can really just have fun with the different shapes that you do. Maybe I put a little chimney or something in through there. I'm going to do some towers in a minute, but right now I'm just kind of getting my main part of my castle on here. Maybe I've got a little like a bridge or something kind of coming over here, and then maybe it kind of comes down in this direction. Who knows? You can have all kinds of fun stuff. Maybe we go like this, and do these little slats to hold that bridge part up. Maybe over here we're going to have a big tower. So I'm going to just do a vertical line in through there. You can just, you know, have fun with the whole makeup of this. I'm going to do a whole bunch of little towers here. I'm going to start with this one over here. So my towers on my castles tend to, I usually put like triangle shapes at the top of them, but of course you can make yours what you could put flags, you can put, you know, other kind of whatever decorative elements you want. I think I want to have a tower in through here with a little triangle. I'm going to have a big one coming off of this corner. And again, just as you're doing yours, you know, freestyle it. That's the funnest part. Like when you're going through this, saying, "Ooh, I want something to pop up over here," or "Ooh, I want, you know, a little lookout area." So maybe on this one, maybe I've got this kind of wraparound balcony thing up in through here, and then I just can give a couple of little lines that are going to make it look like there's a little railing system. Maybe I want there to be, I don't know, maybe I want some flowers, so I can just kind of give these little curlicue marks. Maybe there's a little, you know, garden up on top of here. So feel free, you know, it's just about enjoying the process and kind of making this into something that is, you know, fun and appealing to you. I feel like I want this to have like a little bird's nest kind of room or something up in through here. So I'm going to make just an oval type of a shape, and maybe there's like a little, I don't know, spiral staircase around it, so I can just kind of snake some lines around that. So maybe it looks like there's a little spiral staircase. Maybe we've got another little tower off of this side in through here. And then what I would do once I've got the, well, I think I want another little lookout thing over here, another beautiful balcony. What I would do once I get this all on here, seeing as I'm painting from the side here, and they're probably not all straight, but you step back from it. See if there is additional little details that you want. Maybe you want, you know, more flags or more balconies or more, you know, any kind of little detail. Maybe you want a weather vane or a drawbridge or, you know, something else. It's going to be up to you what kind of additional details that you want to put into this. And then once you've got it all done, we are going to be using this same small brush for the next step. So you can just wash it and dry it and get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to do the base coat for our unicorn, fairy, and mushrooms. I'm going to use my small brush. The color I'm using is just black. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to strategically place them so we can have them off in the distance. They're going to be obviously smaller than our woman who's going to be climbing into this fantasy landscape. But I'm going to have like my mushrooms and my fairy are going to be on this piece of land, so they're going to be kind of proportionately larger than my unicorn, which I'm going to have in through here. So the unicorn will look like it's kind of a little bit farther away. I'm going to be doing just silhouettes of these to start, and then we'll be doing a little bit of highlight to give them a little bit of form and detail on a future step. So I'm again loading my brush with my watered down black paint. I'm going to do some mushrooms first. I'll do my mushrooms and my fairy first, and then we'll work our way to the unicorn. So I'm going to just make a couple of little fun mushrooms. I'm going to have a small one in through here. You can really make them as large or as small as you want. You can have them in whatever size or shape you want, or maybe you don't even want mushrooms, but I knew I needed somewhere for my fairy to sit, so a mushroom was a good place for the fairy to sit. And then I'm going to just do these little kind of silhouetted pieces of grass around the bottom of my my mushroom, just so it has a little bit additional life down at the bottom. I'm going to do a couple over in through here. I'm going to do the one that my fairy's sitting on first. So this one's going to have kind of a downward slope to the mushroom top, something like this. And I'm putting this in a place where it's kind of lighter behind where my fairy is going to sit, so you'll be able to see my fairy pretty well. You could certainly put it anywhere else on the canvas. I just wanted to make sure that I could see her pretty well on top of this background, this darker background that we've created. And then I'm going to just put the stem of my mushroom somewhere in through here. And again, I'm not doing anything fancy for the mushroom shape, just something nice and generic will get me going. I'm going to have another little mushroom head. Maybe this one's going to be tucked behind or in front of this one here, so maybe it's a little bit smaller. And again, just have fun with the shapes of them. Put the little bottom of that one on, and you can see as I'm doing this, because I am using black, you're going to be able to see it in front of or on top of that grass that we had done. So that grass, I did use black, but I also used green, and I wasn't using a lot of paint. So when I go to do this future detail of these mushrooms and my fairy and stuff, I still had more room in that tonal value to bring it darker with this black, so that helps out. So my fairy, I'm going to have her sitting kind of in a nice relaxed position. So I'm going to put, I'm going to start with just kind of the top of a triangle for her leg in through here, like this. The right side of this is her thigh, so I'm going to make it a little bit wider. This is going to be her knee and her little calf. And then I'm just going to put a little bump out part for her foot. Something like that. That might not be the best position, but we'll work with that. Maybe a little bit more down. There we go. And then I'm going to put her torso. So this is just going to be kind of a rectangle type of a shape with a little bump for her butt down at the bottom like that. So this is her back. Then I'm going to, and this is a little bit taller than the knee. I'm going to go ahead and put her arm, her elbow is going to be resting on her knee. So I'm just going to go from this little shoulder area, put a little diagonal line to her knee, and then a little diagonal line for her forearm up to her head. Something like that will work out for me. I'm going to put her head on. So I've got her face is going to rest on her hand, something like that. And she's so tiny, you don't need a lot of detail. I need her little top bun of her head or something like that in through there. I need to connect it to her back. Something like that works out. I just need to make sure her head is the right shape or looks good to me. Maybe her butt needs to be a little bigger. There we go. That looks pretty good. I'm just adjusting her as I go here. There we go. There we go. That looks like a good shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and put her beautiful fairy wings on. So I just always think of these as kind of like butterfly wings. I'm going to take this and kind of cross over her head and just bring it up like that and kind of mid-back, something like that. And then on this bottom side, I'm going to bring this kind of just out like that, and then something like that. And then her wings, I want them to look a little transparent, so I'm putting more water on my brush, and I just kind of give these little kind of streaks throughout the wing itself so it looks a little transparent, and we can see some of those colors. And then again, I'll be adding more detail to it in a little bit, but that's looking pretty good to me like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do my shape for my unicorn. I'm going to have kind of the side view of the unicorn. I'm thinking of this as like a horse. So I'm going to do a oval type of a shape for the body. Something like this. So it's got, it's about twice as long as it is tall. Kind of like an oval, kind of bean type of a shape, something like this. I'm going to go ahead and put the legs. So I'm imagining this kind of in the grass, Like we might not even see the bottom of the feet. It's right next to our river, so if anything goes wrong with the legs or the feet, we can always hide them. But I'm going to do the front one first. So the thigh comes out from about here, and then I've got just this kind of top thigh part to the horse, and then the bottom part, something like this. So I'm not trying to make it too fancy, just giving myself a nice simple illusion. The other leg is going to just kind of come down in through here. I'm going to do the same thing for the back leg. They have big back thighs, so I'm going to bring this thigh kind of down in through here, and then bring that other part of the leg just into the grass. I'm going to do the other back leg is going to come just kind of almost straight down from here, something like that. And again, grass, grass, grass down at the bottom. And again, I've got it kind of walking towards the light. So I'm going to put a head on right now with, again, just a little bit more of the watered down black. They have big solid necks, so we're going to make just a big kind of neck in through there. I'm going to bring, kind of round out this top in through here, and then just bring down a little bump for the nose part of my unicorn, something like that. That looks good. Maybe a little bit further with my teeny brush. There we go. That looks good. I'm going to put a horn for my unicorn horn coming out in the middle of the forehead, just kind of popping it out as far as I want it. I need a couple little ears, just kind of making those go forward, something like that, just little bumps on the top of the head. And then I'm going to make a big fluffy tail coming out in this direction. And this will look much better once we add some little highlights to it, but right now this just gets us started. And again, anything that you feel is wrong, just hide it with some little pieces of grass, or wait till you see it after we have the highlights on it before you make any decision if you want to hide pieces with your grass. And then we're going to maybe just bump out this neck a little bit more for some where the mane is going to be. We're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our mushrooms, fairy, and unicorn. I'm using my small brush. The colors I'm using are fluorescent pink, white, cobalt blue, and I might use a little black, green, and yellow to maybe, if I wanted, finish up any of that little grass around these objects. But first I'm going to tackle my mushrooms and my fairy because I'm using the same colors as for their highlights. So I'm going to pick up some fluorescent pink, and I'm really just going to kind of do a second coat on these objects, just a thin coat with my fluorescent pink. I'm leaving a little bit of the black showing, especially where, like, underneath the top of the mushroom. My fluorescent pink is going to be transparent or translucent, which means you can see through it. So this is just, in essence, kind of adding like a little bit of a glaze on top of the black, which is giving them this really neat appearance. But I want to utilize that black as like a shadow maker. So underneath, between the topper and the stem of it, I can leave some of that black showing, which will create a little bit of a shadow. I'm watching out for her rear end here, so I'm going to just kind of curve that underneath her rear end, and then just maybe make it a little bit more thicker with the pink paint as it's meeting the other mushroom, so that way it will, the thicker the paint is, the less you'll be able to see through it. I'm going to put dots and stuff like that on these in a minute, but I'll maybe leave it a little bit darker on this back side as well, so less paint on my brush will help to do that, because again, the less paint I put on top of that black, the more you're going to be able to see through it. So that's pretty good. I'm going to pick up more of my fluorescent pink and do the same thing on my girl. I'm just going to kind of, on my fairy, I'm just going to kind of put little streaks on her. So just little pink streaks on maybe the front side of her body, on her leg, maybe a little bit on her arm. I'm just kind of giving these little hints of the color on her wings as well. I can put almost right on top of the whole wing because those spots that didn't have black are going to be even lighter. So that works out. While that's kind of drying, I'm going to go to my unicorn and put his, I don't know if it's a he or she. I'm going to call it a he because it's got blue on it, so I associate boys with blue. So I'm going to do this and then I'll come back to my fairy and my mushrooms in a minute. So I'm going to be using cobalt blue and white on my brush at the same time to give myself the highlights on the tail. So I'm going to just bring some cobalt blue and white on the top of that tail. I'm going to do that same thing on the mane. So blue and white is going to give me just this beautiful highlight that's going to separate the mane from the body itself. And you could do lots of detail on this this unicorn, or very minimal detail. It's going to be wherever you want it to go. I'm going to pick up more blue right now on my brush just to give myself a little highlight on the top or the front of that leg, maybe a little bit on like this thigh area in through here. So just adding a little bit of blue, but not a lot, not as light as I did to the mane, and this will give a little bit of shape to the unicorn itself. Picking up a little bit more blue and white, so a little bit lighter. It's going to give me just a brightness on that horn itself. So if you want it to be really bright blue, where you can see it a lot, just add a little bit more white underneath it. So I'm going to have a bright blue horn, but I needed to put a tiny bit of white on it first, so it'll show up better. So I'm just picking up my cobalt blue, putting that on top of my white, and now I've got this really nice bright unicorn horn. And of course you can make that any lighter or darker, whatever works for you. I'm going to go back to my my mushrooms and my little fairy, and I'm going to use white and fluorescent pink on my brush. I'm going to put a couple of fun little polka dots on my mushrooms. So this is white and fluorescent pink. I chose not to use the light pink because I wanted some good diversity in these colors. So I'm just using the fluorescent pink and white at the same time on the side where the light source is, and then as I move to the darker side, I just use a little bit more of just the pink. So what this is going to do is just give you those, you know, bright polka dots on your mushroom again, so the viewer can really see them, and it can really provide some nice fun element to your fantasy painting. And then just kind of fading the polka dots out on this right hand side, so just picking up more pink as opposed to the pink and the white, and again just making them a little bit darker as they go towards the dark side of the mushroom. And then I'm going to add a little highlight on her with my fluorescent pink and white, maybe just a little bit on her wing in through here so we can see the edge of that in front of her body like that. I don't feel like I want to do much more to her body itself. I'm thinking that that's looking pretty good. I'm going to play with this grass for a second, so washing and drying my brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of green, yellow, and white on my brush at the same time. I just want a couple little pieces of grass to show at the bottom of these mushrooms. A little bit of green, yellow, and white. And this is just one of those little touches that feeds my eye. You might not feel that you need to do it. And then at the bottom of the horse, I'm going to put a little bit of more silhouetted grass, like the horse is shadowing it maybe, so a little green and black, just to kind of put maybe a little shadow underneath the horse. And, you know, just finding finding what works for you. Maybe now a little green, yellow, and white. Green, yellow, and white is going on my brush just to make those legs kind of as feeling as natural as they can on this little area. A little bit more black, and then you just fiddle with it as much as you want. We're going to be using this same small brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting waterfalls and bubbles. I'm using my small brush. The colors I'm using are blue, white, pink, black, and I think that might be it. You can, of course, modify the placement or the quantity of waterfalls and bubbles as much as you'd like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a couple of waterfalls coming off of this arch into my river. You could, again, do as many as you want. Maybe I'll have one coming off of here too into the river. My whole kind of thought process, though, is wherever they come off of this arch, I feel like they would want to land in the water. So I think you just want to, if you wanted one, say, coming off of here, just kind of plan where it's going to be falling in the water, so you don't want it to, cover up something that you had worked really hard at getting. So I'm going to put some blue and white on my small brush at the same time, with maybe a little bit of water too, so I can kind of plan this out. I'm going to have one kind of coming off of here, and if I have it starting here, I'm going to have it landing in my water about here. So all I'm going to be doing is these long kind of flowy type of brush stroke. I don't need to do a lot because I'm just giving the implication that this is water coming off of here. So I'm just going to kind of curve it coming off of here and then let gravity take over and just do a couple of strategic kind of streaks coming down towards the water, down towards my river itself. So blue and white, and any combination thereof. I just kind of keep flipping back and forth between the blue and the white, so I can have some areas lighter, some areas darker, just to give myself that appearance. I'm going to do a little one coming off of here, so maybe start it in through here and then just straight down, land in my water in through here. And this one's farther away, so I'm going to make it maybe skinnier, a little skinnier. So again, because this is such small detail, I don't, just giving the implication of what it's doing is all you need to do. The amount of detail that needs to be put into it is just very minimal because it's such a small thing you're doing. You could, make little splash ups down, when it hits the water, where it hits the river, if you wanted to give it a little bit more information. I'm going to put one more, maybe coming off of here, ending a little bit further down in through here, so wherever that is, just goes straight up, so somewhere in through here is where this one's going to come out, and then again, just kind of curving it as it comes out of that greenery, and then just bringing it down to my water in through there. Pick up a little bit more white just to give it the effervescent flowy quality of water coming out of a fantasy style landscape, and then just bringing this down here, and then maybe giving myself a little, I just picked up a little bit more blue, giving myself a little kind of splash or ripple as it meets that water. And then maybe some little splash ups with a little bit of white, just to give myself, again, a little bit more detail, but not totally necessary. So that's good in through there. So now I'm going to make some bubbles. So my bubbles are just going to be circular type of objects that I can have partial ones or full ones. If I want to have a partial one, I could do kind of just like sneak the bottom portion of one in through there. I can have small ones, big ones, whatever you want to do. They can be behind these greenery things or in front of them. So what I'm going to do to start off is just plan them out. I'm going to use a little bit of watered down white paint. So I took white paint and just added a touch of water to it. You could do the same thing with liquid medium. I'm going to take and just kind of give myself just kind of a roadmap where I want them to be. Just a nice faint kind of circular type of shape. You can have, again, big ones or small ones. I'm going to do a variety of sizes. Maybe I've got a little one kind of coming out over and through here. Perhaps behind, I guess, is what I'm doing with this one. There we go. Just giving myself a nice kind of faint line for the edge of it. And then I'm going to do a whole bunch in through here. So maybe a little one here, maybe a bigger one here. And again, make them as big or as small as you want. This is going to be, you know, wherever your visual preference is as far as making little bubbles. Just going to kind of thin out these edges so it's not too firm of an outline. There we go. That works. But the trick is to be able to see. You want to still maintain that background behind it. So I want these to be kind of bubbles that are taking on the colors behind it. So I'm just kind of using this white to give me, again, a little bit of a roadmap where I want them, and then I'll be putting some colors on them to make them look like they've got a lot of liveliness to them, almost like soap bubble kind of things. I'm going to put one behind here, again, and that one's going to be hidden behind there a little bit. Maybe I'll do a little small one up in through here. And these are great to put on here to hide things. If you were going through this process and you're like, oh, I don't really like how this thing came out, well, just put a big bubble in front of it and you'll be fine. You can disguise it that way. So I'm thinking that that's a pretty good number. Again, my woman is going to be over in through here, so I've got lots of stuff happening here, down at the bottom, so that's looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to put a little bit of blue paint on it. Again, you can use with a little bit of liquid medium in it, and I'm just going to kind of swipe this color along the edges. So I'm considering this to be kind of like a reflective quality. You don't have to do it around the whole thing. Just kind of pick a side of that bubble and give a little swipe. I just went through a little wet white paint, so that one is going to turn out a little bit softer looking, and I also went outside my line, so I just quickly got a little bit of water in order to back that off a bit. I was going too fast. There we go. Picking up more of my blue and giving myself some more little streaks of this color along the edges. Again, this is going to allow you to see these bubbles in front of all this background, and it's going to give them a little bit more of a realistic type of quality to them, like they're reflecting all these colors in the atmosphere. So if you chose to do different colors for your background than I did, those would be the colors that you use in the reflection of these bubbles. So if you had lots of, let's say, orange, or you used a vibrant purple, those would be the colors that you'd want to bring into these reflections of the bubbles. Now I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to pick up some fluorescent pink. So washing and drying my brush, picking up some fluorescent pink, and I'm going to conversely go on a different side of the bubble and give myself a pink mark. And again, the pink is going to be transparent, so going on top of some of that white outline that you did will allow you to see that color a little bit more. But if you're going through the process and you're not able to see it as much as you wanted to, you could certainly put more white behind it, and that'll allow you to see it even more. So again, I'm just kind of using my fluorescent pink, giving myself these beautiful little reflective type of marks on my bubbles, and of course you could even overlap it into the blue section if you wanted to. I'm going to do another color, and we're also going to be doing white marks white little twinkle marks in our bubbles in a minute. So this is, again, just that pink. So I hit them all. Now I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black paint. So this is going to be, I don't even know if I said I was going to use black, but I'm using a little bit of black too. And I'm going to just give myself, again, there's black in our scenery, so we can use that black to give us, to help these bubbles pop out even more. So I have a tiny bit of black, and I can give myself a little black streak in them. You can do it anywhere you feel is going to benefit you. You can do it next to the blue. I think I need to make my brush a little bit more in control. Hold on. I feel like it was splaying a bit too much for me. You can do it next to the blue. You can do it next to the pink. Wherever you feel it would benefit you. I'm going through my waterfall right now with my finger, which is okay, but I'm spreading the white paint elsewhere. I'll have to make little corrections with that later. And again, just as you're going through these, you don't have to make them exact. Each one does not have to be exactly the same. I am just allowing for these colors to reflect in my bubbles. So now that I've got that, I'm going to do a bright white like shine to them. So I'm washing and drying my brush. I'm going to pick up white paint, and I'm going to do these little shiny parts on them. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to bring it kind of in a curved type of a shape, something like that. This is just white paint. Taking my brush and just giving a little kind of curved type of vibrant, reflective mark on these bubbles. So this is going to tell the viewer the shape. It's going to help to, again, get them stand out a little bit more. And if you wanted to amp it up even more, you can take more white, and you could even do like a little starburst coming out them if you wanted to add that extra bit of shine to them. That's going to be up to you if you want them to be totally shiny like that or not. And then that's it on those. You can certainly sit and fiddle with them as much as you want. We're going to be using our bright brush for the next step. So once you've got your bubbles done, you can put this small brush away, take out your bright brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're drawing an outline for our frame. I know I said I was going to be using my bright brush, but I changed my mind. I'm going to use my piece of chalk to do this. I'm also going to use my small brush as a measuring tool, because I'm going to show you how to do this without using a ruler or a straight edged object to help you with straight lines. You could certainly use any kind of tools that you'd like on your end to create some nice straight lines, but I'm going to show you a kind of way to do it without tools other than your drawing utensil and maybe your paintbrush as your measuring tool. So I'm going to be creating two rectangles. One of them is going to be right next to my landscape, and then the other one is going to be about halfway between that and the edge of my canvas. So this is going to create a wood or a place for our picture frame to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of dots, and I'm going to connect those dots. The first one I'm going to do is around my picture in through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of on the top of my scenery, kind of eyeball the lowest spot where the background kind of touches here. So for me, it's kind of right on this side, seems to be lower than here. So I'm going to make myself a marker right about here. And I think you can see that. It's somewhere around here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush and measure how far away from the top of my canvas that is. And then I can go throughout this whole area and make myself as many markers as I want. Where did that come? That's like the T on my brush. I've got letters that I can kind of see how far that is. So somewhere in through here, and I just need it to come all the way out to here. So once I've got my markers, I can just kind of draw a line connecting those markers. So something like this. That'll get me nice and a nice pretty straight line. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. So even if you have a little bit that is outside of your landscape area, when we go to do the little framework of the painting the frame, we can certainly correct that. So for me, I'm thinking somewhere in through here's probably, this looks like I already marked it in through here, so that looks pretty good to me. Somewhere in through here. And then of course I can take this again and then just kind of go subsequently down or up, making myself as many little markers as would work, and then I just can connect those. So I'm just creating this pretty straight line without having to use a ruler. I can do the same thing down at the bottom. So I'm going to go maybe somewhere in through here. I think that's going to be my first marker. And then, of course, make as many markers as you want throughout here at that same height, and then just connect those dots. It's just a nice, simple way to kind of give yourself these linear type of, is that good? These linear type of elements without having to rely on too many extra tools. Especially when you're doing a fantasy type of thing like this. I'm making it surreal by putting this exterior frame on it, but you could certainly, you know, just paint the whole outside if you want to. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go about halfway between this line and the edge of my canvas. So for me, this is about 3 inches away from the edge of my canvas. So half of that is about 1.5 inches. So again, I can kind of either eyeball it or measure it, but once I've got that first one done, I can just make as many more markers as I want. I can do this even just up at the top because I know it's all going to be the same for me with the distance or pretty much the same. It's going to be a little awkward on this side. I hope I'm not too far into the camera here. Somewhere in through here. And again, you could certainly use a ruler if you wanted to. Just remeasure here, make sure I've got myself the height that I want somewhere. And you'll find, you know, if you do this step several times and you practice it enough, you tend to get much more comfortable with it. I have a shaky hand, so like right now I'm resting my hand on my easel, which helps me kind of go straight across. I also know that if I keep my eye on the prize, which is the next dot, that helps me to go a little bit straighter as well. So this one I need to make sure I go over in this corner. There we go. But you'll find your own method. You can hang on to the edge of the canvas. You could, you know, do some kind of fun way like that. Like if I take this over here, let's see if I can do this fun trick for you. And I just put my chalk on my brush at the same place and just ride it down the side. That gives me a pretty straight line. So there's different fun methods that you can use. You either connect the dots, rulers, you know, straight edge pieces of cardboard, whatever works for you. And then you make any little adjustments that you feel are necessary, and we will be using our bright brush for the next step. So you can put your chalk away, take out your bright brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be painting the wood grain of our frame. I'm going to be using my bright brush. The dominant colors I'm using are brown and burnt sienna, but I may also pick up some of my wall color and maybe a little bit of black as well. So I love making this faux wood finish. I think it's a lot of fun, and I like to kind of do it in a fun way. It sounds silly, but I like making wood grain. My biggest challenge at this moment is this little piece of greenery in through here. So before I start kind of tackling the rest, I'm going to put a coat of my background color right on top of that. So this is that light tannish gray that we used for the background. I just wanted to make sure that this little section didn't give me any problems. So with my transparent paint. So I'm just starting with that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how I'm going to create the wood grain. So I'm washing and drying my brush. For me, my brown paint is transparent. So I use that to my advantage when doing wood grain. What I'm going to do is I take a little bit of that brown, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating these kind of fun, streaky type of marks that are going to resemble the grain of wood. The only trick with, well, not the only trick, but one of the things that I am being mindful of through this is I don't really want to go a full solid color. So I will be leaving some of this color from the background showing. That's going to add add to the texture of the wood grain. I do want to also put corners on my frame, so I'm going to, when I'm in the corners, I'm going to take a little bit of my brown and just do a diagonal mark like that, and that will help me to understand that everything, you know, on this side has got to go, you know, horizontally, and coming on the opposite side, it's got to go vertical. So that's going to just help me to make sure I get those areas in properly. So I can just take this from the corner to corner, and then I'm going to just kind of pull out to this left-hand side some of these streaks, and that's going to guide me into my wood grain. And you might want a nice dark, you know, cherry wood kind of thing, or that's got reddish type of tones. You might want a walnut where it's going to be even more brown. So just feel, you know, make this wood grain whatever is visually appealing to you. We're going to be putting some highlights and shadows and stuff around the edges of the frame. So I will be touching those during this process, but I'm not going to be terribly concerned about getting those edges of the frame perfect yet, because I know I've got that other step coming. So right now, just kind of working on these little corners, just getting those in place. And now I'm going to load up with a little bit more brown paint so I can really get some nice long type of streaks in through here. As I'm doing this wood grain, you can see the thicker the brown is, the darker it's going to be. If I want there to be kind of little knots in the wood, I can do almost like a little circular type of brush stroke, and that's going to create a little knot in the wood grain. I'm almost rubbing it onto the oh, I didn't bring this little corner out. I'm more rubbing it than I am painting it with a thick layer, and this way, this is how I'm going to allow or see those lighter tones within the wood grain. So that's looking pretty good up there. And I'm going to add the burnt sienna in a minute as well. I'm just pulling this down in through here. And because we're doing this type of technique, my edges, again, the edges that are meeting that interior picture don't need to be perfect right now. Oops, I just ran through some wet green somewhere. We are going to be adding a highlight and shadow to the edges of this frame. So I'm not laboring over that at this moment, knowing that that's a future step coming. So I'm just making sure that if there is some trouble areas, like still up in through here, that I, you know, tackle that as much as I can, but I don't need to do too much to it. Picking up more of my brown, just kind of going up and down, giving it a good rub where you're going to be able to see some of those light areas behind it and the dark areas from where that paint is a little bit thicker, where the brown is a little bit thicker. And because I'm doing it very with a thin coat of paint, like I'm not using it super heavy, I'm more concentrating on just giving this illusion of the wood grain. Because I'm doing it in this manner, it's drying really fast, and because it's not super thick. So because it's drying fast, I'm going to be able to incorporate some burnt sienna in it in a minute as well. I wanted this to be a little bit darker over here, so I'm getting the brown as dark as I want it before I start adding that burnt sienna into it. It's looking pretty fancy. Just bringing this all the way up in through here, watching where my chalk marks are so I can kind of follow those but not worry too much about them. Just making sure this is as dark as I want it. And now that I've got that wood grain established, just kind of tweaking this corner a little bit. And you could put black in the corners too if you wanted to. I'm going to, when I do my highlights and shadows later, I might intensify those little corners, but that's looking pretty good for me now. Now what I'm going to do without washing my brush, I'm just picking up a little bit of burnt sienna, just a little bit on my brush, and I can start to incorporate this warmer wood tone into it. So if you really love this burnt sienna, you could actually wait for the whole brown frame to dry and then put like a glaze of this burnt sienna on top of it. And that would just kind of tint the wood into more of like a chestnut type of a color. But again, that's going to be up to you. Maybe you want your wood to be more of like an ebony type of a wood where there's darker, blacker tones to it. So wherever your preference is in your wood grain color is up to you. And again, I'm just kind of adding some little bits of burnt sienna throughout here. I might end up putting more on it as it dries. I might find that I want to do more or more brown, but I would definitely kind of get it on here, let it dry, and then if there's any, additional tweaks in that color that you want to incorporate, because the more you layer on it, the more it's going to look a little bit more natural. So that'll be, again, wherever you feel your visual preference is. And then once you've got this done, we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. I'm just get a little bit of this burnt sienna down this side over in through here, and then I'm going to wash and dry this brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our frame. I'm using my bright brush. The colors I'm using are black, white, probably my tan, brown, and that might be it. If I use any other colors, I'll let you know. What I'm going to do is I am going to be putting the effects of a light source that is in the room, not in the landscape. So I am putting in my head, my light source is going to be up and to the right. So I'm going to have all of my shadows and highlights dictated by a light source that's up and to the right. So I'm going to have shadows coming down from the frame. It's going to cast a shadow on the left side and underneath. The interior of the frame is going to cast a little bit of a shadow, or have the edge of the frame is going to be shadowed on this bottom side. Then my highlights are going to be on the top edge, on this right edge, and then on the top edge here, and then on the right edge here. I'm going to start with my shadows. Oh, and I might put a little more shadow in these corners here. I feel like they're not dark enough. I'm going to start with my shadow underneath the frame, and I'm going to be using black and brown. This is going to be a really clean shadow, because I'm going to have a dissipated shadow by my girl, so I want this to kind of stand out as something different. So I'm going to have it really clean lines. I'm going to take my my brush and add black paint to it. Really what I'm going to be doing is just doing a big rectangle coming off of here, and it's going to come out maybe about 1/2 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch out in through here. So that's going to be my target that I'm headed for. I'm going to start it. I'm going to come down from this corner maybe about 1/4 of an inch and in, 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch and in, something like this. I'm going to just give myself a little vertical line like that, and a little diagonal line like this. This just is going to keep me straight, or keep my head understanding where I want it to go. So I've got black paint on my brush. You could use black, brown, a little bit of water, whatever's going to help you get a nice kind of long, broad stroke. I'm going to underline my frame. I'm going to keep my eye on the prize, which is my other marker. So something like this. I am bracing myself on my canvas. Again, with my hand. This is my kind of way to keep my hands straight. And I've got a little bit of moisture on my brush. And I also and in my head toying with the idea that the frame I'm painting is a wood frame, so my edges don't have to be perfect. Like if the edge of it's a little wobbly, I'm okay with that because I'm considering it to be a wooded frame, which could have some wobbly edges to it. And then I'm going to go ahead and make myself a long rectangle, just kind of bringing this a little ways away, like this, and I'm going to paint this whole section in with my shadowy color. So black, right now I've got black, brown, and a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm just painting in a section here. You could make this really clean looking and have it just one solid color. That would look just fine. The tip or the tip of my frame, I pulled this shadow away from it, so it would make it look like it's off. It's three-dimensional a little bit, so this is just one of those little, I might have to clean this little corner up in a minute. My brush is getting away from me. Bringing that shadow away from the edge of the picture frame makes it look like it's off the wall a little bit and is giving you that illusion of it being three-dimensional. And I'm just kind of slowly making my way over here. And you could use, again, a variety of brushes, a variety of techniques to get this done. You could even mask this section off so you had a nice straight line, but we're just freestyling today. I'm going to do the same thing up in this corner here. So I know that this is my target down in through here, right on this corner here. I'm going to do the same kind of effect that I did over on that bottom right corner. So I'm going to come down just maybe about a quarter to a half of an inch. Give myself a little horizontal, and this might come down at a little diagonal. I'm feeling like if my light source is up there, I might have a tiny bit of a diagonal, something like that. And then I'm going to just keep my eye on the prize. I could, of course, do what we did with the chalk and do lots of little extra helping lines or marks, but I'm just going to go for it. And we're going to see what happens. This is a... I like these bright brushes because the tip will not wiggle much on you. And I think when doing these straight lines, that helps. As of course, it just wiggled on me there, but that helps too if you do want to do a freestyle like this without using another aid. Your bristles being firm or steady helps with the process. And then I'm just going to bring this down the interior or right next to the frame. And if you made your shadow go into the wall too much or over here or it wobbled too much, just let it dry and then you can come back with your wall color and just clean up that edge. So that's, we just did a flat color for the wall, so that is, it's an easy cleanup. It's an easy cleanup on aisle 5. No, just kidding. It's an easy cleanup when you're if you needed to do anything with that exterior shadow on the wall. So once I've got this done, I'm going to do a couple of shadows in the corners of my frame. That's looking pretty good. I might have to go over a couple of those little areas to get it either more straight or filled in a little bit more, but that's looking good for now. I'm going to clean up this little corner in through here. And as you're getting these final details on, you can see how those edges, if you needed to adjust them any, you certainly could. So I'm going to do black, a small line of black down the inside of these guys right in through here. So I'm just I'm reloading my brush with just black and a little bit of water. You could, if you felt that you couldn't get a slender enough line with this type of brush in through here, you could just use your smaller brush as well. And I'm just going to kind of follow my chalk mark with a skinny... I said I was going to do my shadows in the corners of there, but I will do that in a minute. I guess I lost my train of thought in through there. So again, just a skinny little line in through here. And again, I just kind of keep reloading my brush with a little bit of watered down black. I'm comfortable with having to do another layer if I needed to or wanted to. If I made my paint too thin, I can certainly just do another layer, but I just kind of do my first coat in through here, and then if I need to come back and do another layer, I can certainly do that. And I'm going to go ahead and do the top one as well. So right now, just a little bit of thinned out black paint from this corner to that corner. Cross your fingers. Again, you could certainly draw it out with a chalk first or anything that aids you. I'm just going to follow the edge of my frame, and if it's a little wobbly, I'm okay with that. It's a fantasy painting. It can totally be wobbly or straight, whatever works. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm gonna put that shadow I was talking about in the corner of the frame, but I'm gonna just wipe my brush off so I don't have too much paint on it. So it's that dark black, but I wiped it off so on my paper towel, so I have just more of like a thinned out version in those corners, and then maybe just pick up a little bit of black just to give myself just a little more. I felt like the shadow in that corner wasn't dark enough for me, so I wanted to amp it up a little bit. So just a little bit more black, and then maybe just pull it up into those corners. So hardly any paint on my brush, just kind of, again, amping up these little corners so it gives it a little bit more depth or dimension. And then I'm going to do little highlights. So let me just get a little extra black in through there. There we go. So my highlights are going to be, again, at the top, the right, and then top of this one and right of this one. I'm going to use brown and white on my brush. I was thinking of using the wall color, but I'm going to use brown and white so it looks different than the wall color itself. You could certainly pre-mix yourself a light color of any sort that you want. I'm just going to kind of take this and give myself a highlight down the right hand side of this frame. And if I do have, that's not going to be light enough. I can see right now it's going to disappear on that wall, so I just picked up more white. There we go. Now we can see it. And once I get this step done, if I still have chalk mark that's evident, I can certainly just erase that. I suppose I could be using white with a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to pick up a little bit of burnt sienna just so this turns. Yeah, there we go. I just wanted it to make sure you could see it on top of that wall. That looks good. So white and burnt sienna is where I'm headed now with this highlight. I'm going to do the same thing up here. And again, this is the time to get these edges kind of cleaned up if you wanted to or needed to. And I'm just riding it along the top as if, you know, this is the part of the frame that just kind of pops out. Of course, there's so many different profiles of frames, so you could certainly mimic this after something that's in your house or whatever you imagine it to be. Looks pretty good. And then I'm going to do a highlight down here. Burnt sienna and white, maybe a little bit more white. I might do one on the exterior of here too, just because I feel it might catch it if it's a little three-dimensional. A little bit of white and touch of burnt sienna, just catching this corner, making this little clean line in through here, or as clean as I can get it. Maybe a little bit more white just to pop it out just a little bit more. And then if you felt it would make sense to, you could certainly, again, make up here. I feel like this needs to be a little lighter. Just keep amping up that contrast until you feel it stands out enough from that background. You could also lighten up these edges right next to the shadow if you wanted it to really feel like it was, you know, popping out a bit. I just have the white and the brown. Or if you need to clean up those lines. So little highlights along these edges will work as well, just because it would probably be kicked out just a little bit. So that's going to be up to you if you feel that it would benefit you to put a little bit at these edges as well. And then we're going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, make any little fiddling adjustments that you want, and then you can put this bright brush away, take out your small brush, I can never finish this, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the hook and string for our picture frame. I'm using my small brush. The colors I'm using are black, white, and brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint a little nail, and then we're going to paint a string and a shadow, and we'll be all set. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown paint on my small brush. I'm going to find myself the center of my canvas, and I'm going to go just a little bit at the top and go just a little bit below that. So maybe about a half of an inch to an inch, somewhere in through here. And I'm going to make myself just a little kind of round mark, and then just pull it down just a smudge so you can see the base of the nail. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find myself about halfway between that and the edge of my frame. So for me, somewhere in through here, give myself a little marker. Do the same thing on the left-hand side. From here to here, about halfway, somewhere in through here, give myself a little marker. I'm going to draw a line from my hook or my nail to there. So somewhere in through here. Sometimes the simplest things can be the most difficult things. So just going to take this, keep my eye on the prize, which is my marker, in through here, make it go behind my frame like that, and then go ahead and do the other side. So take it from the same spot on my nail, keep my eye on the prize. Sometimes it's hard to keep your eye on the prize. And of course, as always, you could have drawn this out if that made it simpler for you to do, and then just kind of get my string. So this, I'm doing my string first. I will do my shadow in a minute. Let's get that little string on there. Make sure the string is kind of the same width on one side to the other. And this is, you know, again, we're creating a surreal fantasy type of painting. So these little elements that I'm doing right now with this frame is just to make it look more realistic, so it gives that surreal type feel to it. I'm washing and drying my brush. I'm going to put real watered down black paint on my brush right now, so it's very transparent. And when I say very transparent, I want to be able to, I just keep adding water to it until I can really see through it. That's going to be my shadow making color, because I want to be able to see that background around it. My light source is up to the right, so what would it do to this little piece of string? I'm going to bring it, and the little nail, I'm going to bring it kind of from that little nail, I guess right in through here maybe, and then just kind of bring down this diagonal type of a line, something like that. And coming down from the other side, it doesn't have to come exactly at that same angle. Maybe it's a little bit more skewed, and maybe it's closer to that piece of string. So something like this could work for that one. And then I'm going to add some little highlights. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm going to, I wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I'm picking up some black paint, some non-thinned out black paint, to give myself a little shadow underneath my nail, like that. Just something to give the bottom side of that nail a little bit more darkness. You could even, on some of your pieces of string, as they go towards the frame, you could add a touch of black down in that area as well. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush and put a little bit of white paint on it. I'm going to put a little shiny spot on the tip of my nail. So somewhere in through here, just give myself a little shiny spot, and then just give my, I think I have a little yellow on my brush, which is fine. A little tiny white, just give myself a little streak on the top side of this string. I just want to make sure my brush is in control. So somewhere on this top side of this string, just give myself a little streak, and do the same thing over on this side. And that's all I'm going to be doing for my for my string, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my piece of chalk for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put your small brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be drawing an outline for our girl. I'm going to be using my chalk. You could certainly use any drawing utensil that's comfortable to you. I like using my chalk because you guys can see it and it's easy to erase when I make a mistake. So I'm going to be guiding you through a series of markers. We're going to connect those markers. We're going to have some basic shapes that we'll be able to utilize during the painting in process. I'm going to have my girl over on the left-hand side. She's going to be stepping into this fantasy picture landscape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the bottom half of her body, and then we'll build the top half off of that. So I'm going to find myself about halfway up my frame on this left-hand side, and then I'm going to go down from that maybe about an inch and come in about an inch. Somewhere in through here is going to be my first marker. I'm going to give myself a kind of a curved type of line. This is going to be the separation between her shirt and her skirt. So I'm going to give it kind of like a little curved line up in through here, something like that, bringing it right to about here. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from those two little edges. So this is probably about 2.5 inches long right here. I'm going to come in just a little bit, somewhere in through here and in through here, make myself two little markers. I am then going to find her knee. So she's going to be stepping into the frame. I'm going to have her knee is going to be right about in through here. So where this is it's about an inch to the right of here and down maybe about 1.5 inches. Conversely, it's about 1.5 inches above the edge of my frame in through here. So somewhere about there. That's going to be her knee. I'm going to connect here to here. It doesn't have to be a super straight line, just something that will represent her thigh. And then I'm going to bring this down to about here, just shy of the tip of the frame itself. I'm going to make another marker. I'm going to make a marker way off in this corner of my frame, somewhere I would say in through here. I'm going to connect here to here. This is going to be the bottom edge of her skirt, so it's going to be really flowy. It's going to go over her calf of that leg over there, which you can't really see right now, and then it's going to kind of come down and just swoop and give myself this as if it's kind of coming in the wind as she's moving. I'm going to connect this marker to here. This is going to be the back side of her rear end, and then just her skirt flowing. So I'm going to take this in through here and just give it a long wavy type of a line meeting in through this marker in through here. You could certainly make this skirt bigger or fuller if you wanted it to cover any of that corner. That's totally fine. I'm going to give her a couple of legs. This is going to be her calf in through here. So just a couple of little marks, make it a little bit skinnier down at the bottom. I'm also going to give a little underside to the skirt. So I'm just going to take this and just give a little underside. You might not even really be able to see it with my chalk. Maybe I'll use a darker chalk, see if you can see that. Oh, maybe you can see that a little better. Something like that. That's not super important. I'll show you how to paint it when we get there. I'm going to put the other leg coming out here. So this is kind of important where you place it, because you got to imagine if this is her right leg going into the frame, then her left leg would probably be it would come out her hip on the other side, and it would be kind of coming down in this direction. So you don't want it to come like from here and come out over here. It's got to be kind of below her hip in through here. So I'm just going to somewhere down in this area put her little ankle and then her foot, and I'm just kind of marking it at this point. I'll make it more fancy when I paint it, and then her little toe down at the bottom. So then I'm going to put her midsection on. I'm going to go almost halfway between her waist and the top of this picture frame. So I would say this is about halfway. I'm just slightly below that. This is maybe about 2.5 inches tall. This is going to represent the top of her shoulders. something like this. And she's kind of like crouched, leaning forward a little bit as she's going into the frame. So this is going to be her torso in through here. What I'm going to do is, so wherever this marker is, if you just travel straight up, that's kind of the corner of her shoulder in through there. And then this little point of her shirt here, kind of straight up from that, is the corner of the other shoulder. I'm going to put her arm on. So if I take this and just kind of bring it down like this, I'm going to do a sleeve. She's going to have a short sleeve, and then I'm going to have her little arm kind of coming out here. Her elbow is going to be kind of almost in her back a little bit, and then I'm just going to bring this forward with a little hand. Again, I'm just kind of marking things off right now. I don't need it perfect. I do need the front part of her shirt, so I'm just going to give myself a little marker in through there. So something like that. The back side of her, again, I'm going to give a little edge to her shirt. I'm going to give a little curved line for her sleeve. This arm is going to be hidden a little bit by her back, so I'm going to take from the edge of this sleeve and just give myself a little rippled edge down to the corner here, and then I'm going to give her top part of her arm is going to kind of come right in through here. So you want these elbows to kind of be at about the same height, and then just give yourself a little kind of diagonal shape to the edge of the frame. So that's where her hand is going to go. I'm going to do an oval type of a shape for her head. The top of her head is going to come about halfway between her shoulders and the top of the picture, right in through here. So somewhere about here is the top of her head, and I'm just going to give it a generic oval shape for now. We will make it look much fancier with her hair in a little bit. It might be a little bit tipped also at a little bit of a diagonal. And then that's all I'm going to be doing for my outline. You could certainly fiddle with it as much as you want. We're going to be using our small brush for the next step. So you can put your chalk away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the base coat for our girl. I'm using my small brush. The colors I'm using are black, blue, burnt sienna, and white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do her skirt with a base coat of blue. I'll be doing the underside is going to be black, her shirt's black, her hair's black, and then all of her skin pieces I'm going to do with a custom skin tone. So I'm going to first make my custom skin tone, which is going to be with burnt sienna and white. So I've already pre-mixed it here. It's mostly burnt sienna with just a little bit of white. You could certainly tweak this to be a different shade of skin. I'm just going for a nice generic color that is pretty similar to mine, maybe a little bit darker than mine, but you could certainly go for whatever color that you would like. So once I've got that established, I'm going to paint in all of her skin pieces. So that's going to include this little ankle in through here. And just know we do have highlights and shadows and stuff to go. So this is just the base coat. I've got her little heel in through there, the little arch of her foot. I think I need that part to be a little bit wider as it's going under that skirt. And then her little toe. Something like that. She's got them pretty stretched out as she's climbing into the picture frame. And then I've got her little sliver. Oops, I just picked up a different color by accident. Let me turn my palette. Hold on. I got her little sliver of her leg in through here. And again, I'm just doing that base skin coat that I created, bringing it right down to the picture frame itself. Going to do her arms. So her arms, as I'm doing these, of course I might modify the shape a little bit. Oh, I probably should have told you this. I re-outlined this with a darker piece of chalk, so so it was easier to see on camera for the preview of this. But so I can, I'm going to do her arm in through here. If there's any areas as I'm painting this and I'm like, oh, her bicep is too big or too small, just leave that little edge of your chalk or paint over it and just make it whatever way you feel is representational as a good shape. So this is the back side of her arm, and then you could always put your own arm in a similar position to just see what happens to it. And then I've got her forearm in through here on the other side of her arm. So as I'm drawing and painting these things, I'm just mindful as to what is that body part and what is it doing. Then I come up to her wrist in through here, and then as she's kind of got her hand around the edge of the picture frame, I would just maybe just see a little sliver of her hand, of the edge of her hand. So I don't really need to see much. And of course, when I do my my little highlights and shadows and stuff, I can make that look a little bit more believable. But as far as that initial coat of it, I'm thinking that that's looking okay. Maybe a little rounder up in through there. And then of course I can modify anything that I need to during a future step. Let me just get these little edges in through here. There we go. I'm going to do her other arm with the same color. So just getting this to come out of her sleeve in through here. This is the back side of her arm. And then of course we've got her forearm in through here. And I know that one arm is closer to us than the other, so if this right one ends up being a little bit bigger because it's closer to us, I'm okay with that. And her hand's just kind of leaning down, so I'm just gonna kind of bring this down like this. Maybe her fingers are like that, and then we see the little sneak of her thumb like that. That looks good to me. So I'm gonna wash and dry my brush. I'm going to load it with my cobalt blue, and I'm going to do a layer of cobalt blue on her skirt. I know that my cobalt blue is going to be transparent, where you're going to be able to see through it a little bit. I'm just using this as the base coat. When I go to do my highlights and shadows, I'm going to be tweaking the value of it anyway. So I'm just using this to get me started with this color on the skirt, and it's going to give me some nice vibrant notes to it. And then of course I want this to look like it's got a little bit of movement to it, so I'm flipping up the little corner of it. And you know, when I do fabric, one of the biggest things that I like to do is add movement to my paintings, and fabric is great for that. So as I'm going through this process, if I want there to look like, you know, she's moving, I put some ripples in that piece of fabric. It also helps if you are not super comfortable with doing highlights and shadows and things of that nature to create movement. Just adding the shape or the ripple of a piece of fabric can help create that illusion for the viewer without doing a ton of other work. So there's, you know, these little tricks when you're learning how to paint that can help along the way. If you're not super great at one thing yet, maybe you're good at another thing, and you can use that until you're super great at the, you know, at all of the skills. But just adding, you know, ripples in clothing and stuff of that nature can help to tell the form, it can tell the movement, it can tell, you know, stories, all kinds of stuff. I'm just kind of slowly going down here so I don't lose the exterior shape that I had intended. And then I'm going to put a little bit of a black area underneath so we can see the underside of the skirt as well, which again, just another little trick to help sell the realistic story of this. I'll just put a little outline here, and then I'll put black in this little section here. I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of black paint and put this tiny section in through here with black paint. So this is the underside of her skirt. So I'm bringing it right up to her leg and right up to the edge of the skirt. I'm leaving a tiny bit of the blue at the far edge, so that way it looks like it's catching a little bit of the light from our light source, which we're going to be adding big bright light source in a minute or in a future step. And this is helping to shape her legs so it's more visible to the viewer as well. So again, just another little trick to tell the viewer what's happening. Now that I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint her shirt with black paint. Her shirt and her hair are going to get a coat of black paint as the base coat. So I'm just going to go right along her arm in through here, if I don't make her arm too big as I go through this process. So something like this. And then I'm just going to bring the corner of this shirt down past her, past the waist of her skirt. Again, just a little trick to explain to the viewer that this shirt is not stuck to her body. It's got a little, it's pulled away from her body a little bit, and it's, you know, maybe dropping down a little bit in the front because of the posture that she's in right now. Again, clothing is great for telling a whole lot of stuff. I want this back side to be maybe a little bit ripply to take on, again, just a little bit more form or movement. I'm going to kick out the bottom corner of the shirt a little bit too to mimic what's happening on the skirt. So just maybe a little kick out at the bottom of it like that. And then I'm going to go all the way up into her head with this black color. And of course you could use a tiny bit of water on your brush as well as you're going towards these edges if you want them to be nice and clean, and make sure that you brought them out as far as you want it. I'm bringing the edge of her sleeve a little bit past her skin, outside of her skin. So again, it makes it look like it's not just stuck to her. It looks like it's, you know, a little bit larger than her arm is, and it's more comfortable to wear. I think clothes is more comfortable to wear when it's bigger on you. So I paint a lot of times the things that I like in my own life, which is clothes that is almost too large for me. So I'm going to just kind of bring this down and come down on the other side of her arm. I could even bring a little piece underneath that side if I wanted to sell that story a little bit more. Oh, her sleeve just grew a little bit more than I had anticipated, and I'm just going to color this whole thing in with black. When I go up to her head, I'm going to start my process of hair making as well, because I want to have a couple of flyaway pieces, and I'm going to start that process now. But first I'm just going to color in my little ovally type of shape that we started, and then once I've got that colored in, I can pull away some flyaway pieces, because that looks pretty funny right now. So we're going to start the hair making process. So I just put black with a little bit of water on my brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of start pulling away these longer pieces that are going to show the flow of her hair. Just these, almost think of it like silhouetted edges to her hair right now. And I will get it to look better later, but this again is just gonna, maybe we've got some pieces of her hair just flying out over on this side. Again, I'm using a little bit of watered down black paint in order to give myself these nice clean little edges to the hair. I'm gonna actually have some coming over her down this back side too. So just pulling out a couple of pieces of hair. Again, this is going to show lots of movement as I go through this process. I'm going to have highlights and shadows on her arms and skin and stuff, but this is just giving her some long hair. And then I'm going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our girl. I'm going to use my small brush. The colors I'm going to use are black, blue, white, my skin tone, and brown. And if I use any other colors, I'll let you know. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting a shadow of my girl on the frame and on the ground. And then I'm going to be adding shadows and highlights to her skin, her skirt, her shirt, and her hair. What I'm going to be doing first is I'm going to do my shadow of her on the surface of the frame and the floor. So I want this to be a pretty like dissipated type of a shadow, which means it's going to be pretty firm or dark where it meets the object, which is going to be her leg, and like the start of her skirt on here. And then as it gets farther away from the object, it becomes more dissipated, more transparent, more see-through. So like when I do the shadow of her foot, it's going to be pretty dark right underneath her foot. And then as it comes farther away, it kind of disperses and gets lighter. I'm going to do the shadow underneath her skirt first, which will be the shadow on the surface of the frame and on the floor. So I'm going to be using black, brown, and water on my brush to give me that transparent type of appearance. And again, similarly to how I did that shadow up above on the string of the frame, I'm just making sure that I'm nice and transparent. I've got my dark mixture on my brush. I'm going to start right up in through here. This is going to be a shadow of her skirt, and a little bit of, it's probably just of her skirt, on the framework in through here. My frame has kind of like a little lip in through here, and then it drops down. So that's where her shadow is going to be kind of dropping down and riding along the face of the frame itself. I'm just going to pick up a little bit more water on my brush to get this to blend out. I think I actually need a little bit more paint so we can see it. And a shadow is intended to be able to see what's underneath it. So it's just a darker, it's a kind of, think of it like a film of sorts or a glaze of sorts of darkness on top of that underlying object. So if you want the shadow to be transparent, you got to be able to see that stuff underneath it. So that's where I'm using water as my liquefying agent. You could certainly use a liquid medium or anything else that will help you get your paint to be transparent. Just kind of spreading this out the way that I want as it's drying, so I get nice soft blend there. I'm going to do the same thing on the floor surface. This, I'm assuming, is the shadow from the skirt, and it's going to be very transparent. I'll do the shadow from her foot in a minute. I think actually I need a little bit more shadow underneath here as well. Let's make sure that this all is as dark as I want it to be, taking on the shape of, or the shadow from the skirt, bringing it right down to the bottom of the frame. And now that it's going on the wall, and now it's going to go on the floor surface. So I'm okay going right over her foot because I know I'm going to be painting that in a minute. I think I need a little bit more paint so I can actually see it. There's no sense in doing it if you can't actually see it. So just adding a little bit more in through here and just making sure it's pretty transparent so I can see that surface underneath it. And then just getting it to come out. My light source is going to be over there, so it's pulling my shadows over here to the left. That's looking pretty good to me. So now I'm going to put the shadow of her foot. So I'm starting with a little bit more black paint on my brush. I'm going to have this coming right underneath her tippy toe in through here, and I'm going to have it coming out this left-hand side. So you can see how this is darker than what I just did. Because it's closer to the object, and then I'm going to bring it out in this direction and just let it kind of fade out over here. I'm going to put a touch more water on my brush just to get it to blend out. And shadows are great because they can be skewed based on wherever that object is or the light sources. So if you find that your shadow doesn't look exactly like mine, it's all right. And I've got a big flowy skirt, so it can certainly take on some fun little skewed action. I just want people to understand it's coming from that foot, or that it's starting at that foot, this darker one. So I can even add just a little bit more black in through here just to really amp up that appearance. So now I'm going to wash and dry my brush. and I'm going to put my skin tone plus a tiny bit of black paint on my brush so I can give myself a little bit of a shadow on the back side of this calf in through here. So this is skin tone plus a little bit of black. You could certainly use brown too if you wanted to. That's going to be up to you. And I keep just wiping my brush off on my paper towel to get this to dissipate or to blend out. So again, skin tone plus a touch of black, just an itty bitty bit. I'm going to put it underneath here. This one's got a shadow of the skirt on the leg, so I'm going to take this, just give a little round shadow around that leg like that. I've got a little shadow in her ankle. I'm going to put the more skin tone on in a minute, but this is just giving me my shadows underneath. I got a shadow underneath the arch on the foot. That was a struggle. Picking up just a little bit more black so I can get just a little bit more darkness, maybe underneath the toes or going in this direction. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to put, washing my brush, putting a little bit of my skin tone on just to give myself a second coat of my skin tone. Make sure it blends in with my shadow on this side in through here. And you might find that you need to do more than one pass, but for demonstration purposes, sometimes I just kind of show you the one pass so you can get the idea, and then if you feel you need to modify it, I need to amp up her little toe a bit. So this is just the skin tone right now, just making sure I've got the color I want. I'm going to go now skin tone plus a touch of white so I can give myself just an itty bitty highlight. Maybe this is catching just the edges of the light source. Maybe we've got a little extra highlight on this front part, maybe on her little ankle bone, maybe her front part of her foot, maybe a tiny bit on her tippy toe in through here. And of course you can fiddle with that. I feel like I need a little bit more skin tone back here. Maybe a little more darkness on the bottom of her foot. And then of course I would just let it dry and fiddle with it. I'm going to move up to her other skin, which is going to be her arms. And I'm going to put a little bit of brown on my brush to give me a shadow on the back side of the arms. So this is just a little bit of brown. I might have a little remnants of black too, but I think it's mostly brown on my brush. And I'm just giving her a little shadow on the back side of her, the top of her arm, little shadow underneath her elbow, and then a little shadow underneath her forearm down in through here. My light source is over to the right, so it's where I'm putting these shadows. I'm going to put a little bit in the inside of her hand, so if her hand's like this, I'd probably see a shadow on that thumb and then the inside of these fingers like that. And then on the other arm over here, I know I've got my darker hair that's going to be on top of this, but I still need a shadow on this back side of the arm, something like that. That looks good. And then the left side of this little arm in through here gives me a shadow there, maybe a little underneath that elbow, and then this left side of the hand, something like that. I'm going to pick up, I just wiped my brush off, I'm going to pick up my skin tone to make sure I've got a second coat and to make sure my shadows blend in. Of course, again, we're just doing these little tiny areas, so if blending isn't perfect, it's all right. Nobody's gonna call you out on these little tiny areas, but again, I'm just picking up my skin tone, making sure I've got a nice second coat. I'll put a little tiny highlight in a second, but just to satisfy my painterly eye. And then I'm gonna pick up a tiny bit, I wiped my brush off, I picked up a tiny bit of white paint, just to give myself a little itty bitty bit of a highlight on this side of the arm. Maybe a little bit on a couple of these fingers, like that. Maybe a touch on her elbow. And then over on this side, maybe just a little bit on those fingers and forearm. So now I'm going to wash and dry my brush and I'm going to do my skirt. So my skirt is going to be like a nice dark blue color. So I'm going to use cobalt blue with a touch of black up underneath this shirt and through here, maybe in some of the ripples, and then I'll be using cobalt blue and white for my highlights. So I'm picking up cobalt blue and a touch of black paint. The black can really take over quickly, so you just want to kind of be mindful of how much is on your brush and just watch it, because once it goes black, it's tough to bring that blue back. So just, you know, be mindful that you've always got quite a bit of the cobalt blue in the black mixture, and that'll help you to kind of stay in control of its darkness. I definitely want it to be pretty dark, but again, I know that the black can really take over, and then she would just be wearing a black skirt, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you want some of that darkness to be included, just a tiny touch of the black will work. And then coming down in through here, if I wanted to dip in a little bit, I can pick up just a tiny bit more black and just give just a little bit of darkness down here on top of, you know, that cobalt blue. Back in through here, I want some little ripples and waves. So right now I'm just switching back and forth between the cobalt blue and black in order to give myself a second coat of this blue and to put any shadowy areas in. The shadowy areas are going to be where I want it to kind of dip in or are on the opposing side from the light source. And then the second coat is just making sure that I have a full second coat. I'll put highlights on in a minute, but I'm going to pick up a tiny bit more black right now just to give myself just a little bit of a shadow here. So her leg is here. So if I want the skirt to tell a little bit of that movement, I can put a little darkness in through here as well. That's going to help to explain to the viewer what motion her leg is in. Now I'm going to pick up cobalt blue and white to give myself a little highlight, definitely on the right side of this piece of her skirt in through here. And again, I'm working on a second coat, so I'm fulfilling the need to have good opacity in certain areas, because my cobalt blue again would be a little transparent. I'm putting this second coat on to prevent that from happening, as well as give myself all of my movement in my skirt. So I want a little pop up there. Maybe I've got a little highlight in through here where my skirt is kind of coming out into the real world. And then just kind of playing with any little additional pieces of movement that I might want. My skirt's going to come down in this direction. Just getting this to blend in as much as I want it to. Get this to blend in a little bit more. I'll put probably a little bit more white on this right hand side, but just want to make sure that this is doing what I want it to do. That looks pretty good. If you needed her butt to look a little bit more voluminous, you could also just kind of rub a little bit of lightness in the center area of it. That'll make it pop out a little bit more. I'm going to pick up some white paint, give myself just a real bright highlight over here on this knee. So that looks like it's the closest to our light source in through there. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to work on her shirt, which I hardly need to do anything to her shirt. I just need to make sure the black is black, and if I want a little highlight maybe on her hip or her shoulder, I can do that. I'm going to start with just black paint. She's going to have long hair covering the majority of her back, so I'm not even going to worry about up in through here. I'm just worrying about down on the edges where it meets maybe her hip. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white paint. I started with black. I just picked up a little bit of white paint just to give myself a little highlight over that hip, maybe a little bit on the front of the shirt too. And again, just giving myself that information to show form. Picking up a little bit more black to do a similar exercise on this arm here. I feel like I want this arm to pop out. I feel like her shoulder needs to pop out just a little bit more from my angle. I could be wrong, but I'm going to do it anyways because I feel like her arm would kind of be in this direction. So we got to give her a little bit more in through here. That works. There we go. And now a little bit more black to get this edge of her shirt, like that. And then I'm gonna pop a touch of white on my dirty brush, give myself just a little highlight on her shoulder, maybe on the edge of her sleeve, and then just blend this back. Oops. Oops. My paintbrush got away from me there. Just I put a little bit of water on my brush to back that off. My paintbrush didn't cooperate there. And then just blend this back a little bit so it gives her form on her shoulder, like that. And then I'm going to work on her hair. So her hair, I'm just going to have it on the browner side, or like dark, it's black, but it's going to have some brown highlights. So I washed and dried my brush. I picked up brown paint, and I'm just going to start at the top of her head and bring back these long, flowing brush strokes to explain to the viewer what direction her hair is flowing in. I'm going right over the black, but I'm not coloring it in 100%. I want some of this to kind of lay over her shoulder, so I can just kind of pull back some of this brown over her shoulder, and then coming cascading down her back and flying out down at the bottom like this. So again, this is just brown to start, and it gives me my movement on the hair, and then I will put a little bit of white. In addition, you can even pull this outside of that original footprint that you had for the hair, so that will give you a little bit more color look to it. So something like that works out. Now I'm picking up a tiny bit of white on my dirty brush. The hair right now that I just did is still wet. So this is really a combination of white and brown on my brush right now. I'm going to add just a little bit more highlight on the roundness of her head in through here, and then I'm just going to pull down some of these light highlighted pieces. So I'm using the white with the wet brown to give me a couple little highlighted pieces as it's coming over on this right hand side. And then I would just kind of let it dry. I just picked up a little bit more brown, fiddle with it a bit. If any of these pieces, if I want to amp them up any, I can add more white to them, I can add more brown to them, whatever is tickling your fancy. I wouldn't suggest doing too much if you want it to stay looking like dark hair, but you can certainly just keep fiddling with that. And then we're going to be using our large brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put this small brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the sunshine. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are white and yellow. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding white paint to this nucleus of the sunshine, and then I'm going to be pulling out these bright streaks of sunbeams. When I'm doing this, I am not going to be using a ton of paint. I'm going to be using the kind of the corner or the side of my brush to pull it out. I am going to be crossing it over my frame. You could bring it as far out as you want or keep it localized if you want. It's going to be totally up to you. I'm going to start with a little bit of white paint on my brush, and I'm just kind of dab it in this little center area just to get my head kind of straight as I am planning this out. And then I'm going to start pulling it in these directions, just kind of straight out from that nucleus type of a spot. So you may find that you want to use a different type of brush, that you want to use more white or more yellow or whatever works for you. I am just starting with white paint. You can get it to cross over certain objects. Like if you wanted it to cross over your fairy, you certainly could, or you could make it go behind your fairy. Whatever is visually appealing to you. For me, I wanted it to kind of come outside of the frame. So that's where I am just kind of pulling it far from that center spot. They can be long, they can be short. You can have some really long, some really short. It's going to be whatever you want. The thing that I'm doing though is I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, and I'm really kind of almost scrubbing it in that diagonal type of a direction. And again, you might find that you want more or less. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow in a minute, but right now just kind of getting my idea of where I want these beams to go. This one's kind of going directly at her head, maybe a little behind. And, you know, it's up to you how sunshiny, beamy you want this to be. Whoops, there goes my brush. Hold on a second. Sometimes I get too excited when I'm painting and my brush just goes flying. That's one of those times. So I just started with white. Obviously, that's where I'm starting with it. And then once I've got as many white beams as I want, what I'll do is I'll start incorporating a little bit of yellow into them. And again, be mindful that the yellow can really get away from you. So just when you do add the yellow, just, you know, add it slowly and to your taste. And that way you'll be able to control it a little bit more. So I'm still just in my white right now, just making sure I've got as much of these on as I want and that they're as bright as I want, because once I start adding that yellow, it's kind of like the end all be all. So I'm just gonna, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm gonna just put a tiny bit more white in the center here, make that as bright as I want, because I probably pulled out some of that white and made it dissipate a little bit too much. Now I'm gonna put a tiny bit of yellow paint on my brush, just a itty bitty bit, and then I can start incorporating this into my beams. So proceed with caution. You can do as much or as little as you want. If it's too bright for you, just add either a touch of water or a touch of white into the equation. I'm going to leave a little of the bright white in the center so it doesn't, so it remains the brightest or whitest in the center of that sunshine. But I mean, you could make this sunshiny color peach. You could even put it like on top of her head. That'll make it look like it's shining on her. So just know that the lightness or the brightness of this golden yellowy color can certainly shine on anything. And then you just keep fiddling with it. And once you've got it where you want, we are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So you can put this large brush away. Take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I typically sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm actually going to go bottom right inside the painting. So I'm going to go down by these mushrooms into here. I like to sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you would like for your identifying mark to be. It's totally up to you because it's your painting and you get to sign it however you would like. And that's going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a really exciting, detailed, fantasy type of painting. And I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.